All right. Hey guys, and welcome to Interacts Creator Stories podcast. My name is Judgement, and with me today, I have one of our customers, Kelly Trach, with me. Hi, Kelly. How are you?
Hi, Judgement. I'm so stoked to be here. It's a pleasure to be on the podcast. So thank you.
Of course, of course. So I'm really excited about this one in particular because I actually did not know you or your business, and you had reached out to us to do a case study. And that's where our first touch point happened. And as I was looking for people for the podcast, I thought of you because I was like, oh my God, that actually was a really good story. I remember your case study. And of course, with case studies, mostly it's numbers. But as I looked further into your business, I was like, whoa, this is a really inspiring story that you had.
Thank
So
you.
now to just give, of course, so just to give everybody a little background, kellytrack.com is your business. It's a service-based business. You're a business coach. You have a podcast, and you do courses, and then you also have a book coming out, which is super
hmm
exciting.
hmm
So I'm going to go ahead and let you give your full intro, and then if you want to go straight into how it all started, go for it.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm Kelly Trach. I work as a business coach and I help visionaries build soulful digital businesses with one-on-one services and online courses based on their unique genius, so that they can build it and grow it to full-time income or whatever income that they're desiring. So I got started. I always, when I talk about my story of how I got started, I like to rewind back to high school because I feel like it paints a very clear picture of who I was and who I always had been.
Mhm.
I was like your classic overachiever. I got like straight A's. I had like a 96% average in high school. I
Nice.
won enough scholarships to go to the school of my choice. It was a really competitive business school here in Vancouver, Canada. I did all of the extracurriculars and like courses on weekends. And I at one point was working at Tesla Motors. I had the fancy internships, the case competitions. Like my school sent me abroad to compete. Like I did my exchange abroad. And at the end of business school, I had really wanted. I really had wanted actually a job at Lululemon Athletica because their head office is here in Vancouver, and I could not get that job for the life of me. And there's a couple other really kind of cool companies based out of Vancouver, and I literally could not get hired at them. And it was sometimes I feel like the universe closes off doors for us as to say, like, you don't go down this path.
Mhm.
And I had two job offers at the end of business school. One was like at a telecom company, similar to like what AT&T would be in America. And
Mhm.
one was at a tech company selling software. And I really wasn't stoked or lit up by either. And they just felt like, I just felt like I had worked so hard in business school and I didn't get what I wanted. And all my peers were getting these awesome jobs or doing cool things. And I had these like subpar offers. And I had initially signed with one company and I said I was going to start with them in the fall. And then I had about 8 months between when I was done school and when I was going to start. And I said, well, why don't I have this time? Why don't I try my own business? So I wanted to work on my very first tech startup, and I quickly fell in love with the insane thrill of building a tech startup. So I emailed the job and said, I can't come. I quit like my job 4 months before it even started. So I've like literally always been an entrepreneur right out of the gate from business school.
Wow.
But Canada is not exactly the mecca of tech. So I
Mm.
moved down to San Francisco and I started my first tech startup, and I got into a prestigious pre-accelerator program taught by a literal billionaire that was like taking
Wow.
on young minds and helping them start their startups and teach them. Um, but Tech Startup 1 didn't work, and Tech Startup 2 didn't work, and Tech Startup 3 didn't work. And
Wow.
I was getting very frustrated, and it was just getting really challenging. And I had a week where I was at a cabin in kind of the middle of nowhere in Canada, and the Wi-Fi was bad, and it was like a week to really reflect on my life because things were not working out as planned. And I was sitting down in like a big reclining lazy boy chair, and I was like looking out at the lake, and the sun was streaming through in the morning, and I heard this phrase from my intuition, and it was a phrase I had never heard before, and it was the wisdom of, what if you just did what you were good at? And I had never just done what I was good at. I was always trying to like push for the hardest things and the hardest challenges and take on as much as I could and like overachieve and excel. So I figured, okay, I've literally tried to pursue these really hard things. What if I try to do something I'm good at? And my only options were like try to find another job or start another business. So I started my fourth business, which is this one, kellytrach.com. But it was centered around different principles. It had to be easy. It had to be based on things that I knew intuitively, what came naturally to me, what was easy for me, what I could do with my own bare hands versus need like investors for, or co-founders for, or coders. Like I had to be able to build it out with my own skills. So I inadvertently, looking back, built this whole business kind of based on my genius. And it's taken many pivots over the years because, what everybody sees now is like a successful six-figure business and like, high-end private clients and, courses and like a whole fleshed out thing and like a book deal. It started initially as like a health blog, and then I pivoted into mindset and sort of like life coaching. And then I finally had enough requests for people who were asking me, how'd you build your business? How did you do this? And I always thought that I shouldn't teach business because I had such previous bad luck before, but that was sort of one of my gifts all along. And I didn't really see it, was my love for business and entrepreneurship and starting things. So, a couple years in, I was like, hey, I'm going to really focus on the business coaching. And that's sort of when things sort of started to click together. And I was sort of doing the work I could really uniquely do. And so that's sort of how I ended up here, working as a business coach, helping people build digital businesses based on their genius so that they can really create one-on-one services and online courses, like doing the work that they're meant to be doing in the world.
I love that. That's pretty crazy. So you tried 3 different businesses and none of them worked. What was that like, right? Like in that moment. And at what point were you like, okay, even from the first one, you're like, that didn't work. Here's my next idea. And how did you even come up with all these new ideas?
Yeah, I feel like I'm very good at creating ideas and generating ideas. I feel like I'd always sort of had that entrepreneurial bug, or like I've always been good at solving problems and looking for solutions. I think the really important thing that I always sort of teach to clients or try to pass off to people is like, make sure that you are building something that you really resonate with, because my ideas were good. They weren't
Mhm.
bad, but they weren't, I wasn't the one that was meant to bring them into the world. And
Mm.
um, the first startup was around, they were all around making organic food more accessible to the 99%, not just like the 1%. So my first idea was actually like a Whole Foods meets Costco subscription model, which is actually what Thrive Market looks like now. I don't know if you're familiar with Thrive Market.
I've seen ads for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've had a good idea. I mean, they were obviously the successful ones doing it in the long run. The second one was around a subscription model around reclaiming like the ugly food from, farmers that don't, sort of like grade B produce that doesn't really go to stores or like is imperfect, and trying to sell that online for cheaper. That was really hard and just technically was very difficult logistics wise, which I wasn't good at. And then the third, because I had noticed that I really wanted to help make organic food more accessible, one of the things that I really noticed as a problem was that in the US, the food stamps cards, the EBT cards, you can't buy food online. And it was an issue because if people needed this quality food in food deserts, they couldn't, there wasn't stores nearby that they could access with this food, but they also couldn't get it online because these EBT cards wouldn't go online. So my last and final startup was trying to find a way to take those cards and make them digital and build out a payment gateway. And while all three were great ideas, I did not have the skill set to bring it to life. I had a really hard time getting like co-founders. I feel like I was actually kind of close to getting investors on a couple of them, but like, I don't know, like I felt like sometimes when you try really hard, but like things just are not clicking.
Mhm.
It was sort of like what I had said before the job with Lululemon. It was like, no matter how much I wanted it, all kind of signs pointed to no, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
And I kind of hit a point at the end where I was like, I was just not excited to work on it. And I like loathed doing it and I kind of hated it. And I had picked up some other work on the side. Like I was doing some research for an investor on the side. And I was like working with X Prize, which is like a part of Singularity University in the Bay Area. I was trying to help and volunteer on a team to like win this like huge grant. And I don't know, I've caught myself really like losing interest fast and
Mhm.
switching other focuses and trying to kind of not do it. And I kind of had that moment of like, this is really not for me. Like this is just, it's just not what I'm supposed to be doing. Like something needs to change.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel that. And so then you had a week without you kind of disconnected,
Mhm.
right? So you mentioned reflecting that week and that's how you came up with your current business. So, how did you work through that, and what was your process like? Was there anything special that you did while you were, you didn't have internet, couldn't really do any research, it was just you and your brain?
Yeah. I always like to talk about this concept of like downloads. Like I feel like we always get sort of downloads of what we should be doing, or like waves of intuitive hits or inspiration, whether that comes to you as like flashes across your mind, or like if you hear it, or if you just like think it, or it's sort of like those moments of awakening and understanding. Um, I definitely feel like I only really get my best downloads and ideas and like aha moments when I really take time away. So I feel like I had kind of created the space and container for that new stuff to come in. Um, the other thing, when you were saying, how did you really bring that in? Looking back, I really feel like I really had to drop my ego, and really get clear and honest about what I really wanted, and who I
Yeah.
really wanted to be, and what kind of legacy did I want, and when everything's said and done, what kind of business did I really want to run? And I didn't really want to run a tech startup. Like I had really wanted to be like a motivational speaker, or like an author, or like I don't know, sort of seen kind of what I had seen a couple people do. um, you know, Folks like Danielle Laporte, who's like a spiritual teacher and an author, or Gabby Bernstein. And I was like, whatever they're doing looks great. And like, I feel like if I could do that, that'd be awesome. And it kind of I just had to like really drop that sort of notion in my head of what I should be doing, or what would make sense given my business school background, or like, yeah, what my mind had in its head for my life versus like what my heart and soul wanted, and get just really brutally honest with that, and kind of not bullshit it, and not,
Mhm.
not lie about it, and not sweep it under the rug, because I had swept it under the rug for a long time. And I think it just sort of boils up over time. Like when you have a deeper underlying desire, eventually it'll catch up with you.
I love that though, because I mean, even in my experience working with a lot of different entrepreneurs at Interact, I see a lot of the time where, some people are a little unclear about, where their business is going, what their business even is. And
Mhm.
they just know they're an entrepreneur and they know that's what they want. So I think
Yeah.
that's a great thing to kind of recognize, right? Is like, okay, I need to sit down and actually think about what am I doing here? You know? I think that's a great process. So from there, then finally you came up with your business idea
Mhm.
and you were ready to launch. What feelings were you going through, and what was that next step that you took when you were like, okay, I have this idea, I'm ready to go?
Yeah. Well, at that point, my business was like a health blog, and I was talking about like my autoimmune condition and like my gluten-free diet. And essentially, it was like a very kind of like a holistic living kind of thing, because that was sort of
Mhm.
all I really knew. I had heard of like Malcolm Gladwell's like 10,000 hours rule. And was just like, well, the only thing I've really spent 10,000 hours on is like, me working on like feeling better and that kind of stuff. So I was like writing blog posts about it. But the thing that came up for me most was specifically the fear of judgment from other people, because I went to business school, and there is a certain hmm, there's a certain kind of job you should, I think, in your mind be doing if you go to a certain business
Yeah.
school. And everybody else is a high performer, and your friends are working like in investment banking, or everybody has like jobs that are paying them at least like 100K,
Mhm.
or they're like established in their career, or they're like wanting to make partner, or like I don't know, they just have their lives together. And I was just like, who, like, oh my god, like I'm gonna be this like weird girl online, and like I don't know, nothing's working out for me, all my business has failed, now I have this like stupid blog, who's gonna take me seriously? Like all my coworkers are gonna think like I'm like wasting, I don't know, wasting my talent, when I could be like running the marketing for some like great big organization, versus like me trying to do this blog. And I
Mhm.
just was really caught up in feeling and worrying about what my peers would think or say. And when I had launched one of my earlier ebooks, I was so nervous to read the comments when I had posted that it was live. Like I literally had to get somebody to read it them for me and tell me what they said, because I was so worried people were going to write mean things like, who are you to do this, or like who's going to listen to you, or like what makes you credible, or like why would anybody buy this.
Yeah.
That really came up for me in a big way.
It's so funny that you say that because I feel like especially a few years ago, blogging was like one of those things that you were like, why are you trying to make this into a business, right?
Yeah.
Like people really thought that way, and look at it now.
Yeah.
Everything is a blog, and every time you look stuff up online, like, you're most likely going to come across a blog post, and that can be recipes, that can be like,
Yeah.
self-care stuff, that can be fashion, beauty,
Yeah.
like there's so much of it out there now. And you know I totally identify with that because I felt that way even going into a startup out of
Yeah.
college. Like I felt the same way where, oh, like you graduated with your bachelor's degree, you should be going to some like huge corporate job. And I
Yeah.
realized like I don't like this at all. Startups are more fun. But at the
Yeah.
time, I remember like some people in my family were like, a startup? Like, I don't even know
Yeah.
what that is. And that doesn't sound
Yeah.
like it's a good opportunity. And, look at us now, kind of a thing. And
Yeah.
now that kind of stuff is everything. So I'm glad you are where you are now. But so you're from there, and I remember you mentioning something earlier about making sure that this was something, even though you launched this business, like you needed to differentiate yourself
Mhm.
from other businesses out there, right? That do something similar, or, a competitor. Um, and you talked a little bit about finding your genius. Can
Mhm.
you go into that?
Yes. So I built out this framework called the Genius Framework, and it was something that I had learned through my own experience, and I had kind of haphazardly built this framework from working with coaching clients. I feel like everything I've done in my life and that I now teach and like share and preach on is like stuff I figured out kind of randomly through trial and error, and never like sought out to do this ever once. But when I was doing business coaching, when people literally had approached me asking if they could hire me as a business coach, and at first I was like, no, like I don't know if I'm good, like no, maybe don't give me your money. um but I kind of thought about it, and I was like, you know what, I probably could help these people, like let me try with one client. And of course the first question is like around what can I sell, like what can I, I've got this sort of skill set, how can I like build a business off this? And to me it's very easy. Like when people come to me and they're like, I don't know what to sell, it's so easy for me to like spot their gifts, ask very specific, unique, quirky questions, help them get to the heart of their gifts, and at the end of the day find their genius. So I describe your genius as your top 3 to 5 gifts in synergistic conjunction with one another that really create a world-class expertise doing only what you can uniquely do. And I like to sort of separate gifts from strengths, because like
Oh.
strengths kind of imply that you could always be better, but gifts imply where you're innately gifted and you're already super strong. And I
Mhm.
really believe that when it comes to your genius and you doing the work you're born to do, you have these gifts that are innate and 10 out of 10 and fully developed, and you could totally go do the thing you want to do because you have enough of you have honed this skill set actually for a long time now. It's about really recognizing it. So I had built out sort of these series of questions that I would ask coaching clients to help me understand what their gifts were and help them figure out, okay, how can we turn that into a business and what could we sell?
Mhm.
And that ended up getting working. And then I turned it into one of my modules in my course, and that ended up working. And as we'll chat about later, it turned into a quiz and now a book. Um, but essentially, I had really noticed that when people built businesses based on their unique gifts and their unique expertise, they were really automatically able to stand out way more in the sea of
Wow.
folks being able to offer some different things, even though it felt like everybody else on Instagram was offering the same thing. So for example, like I have clients that have been able to start their business and then book their first paid client within like 48 hours of launching, because
Wow.
they're doing their special gift, and it's dependent on like their true soul essence and their innate talent. Or clients have been able to like out earn corporate salaries by the end of their first year in business because they're literally doing the work that they are born to do, and they've carved out a niche for themselves, because it's like when I see their business, it's like so obviously them and their talents and their gifts.
Yeah.
Or other clients, the first month after they launch, they get like literally a paid speaking gig at Google, because it's like people can spot. I always say like people can spot genius, and when you're doing your genius, like people notice and heads turn, because
Mhm.
it's like this magnet that pulls people in, because it's like somebody really showing up as their authentic core essence. And you are really magnetic for what you desire, because you're really like owning your gifts, owning your talents, and building a business around that. And that can really help you position yourself in a field that is really crowded and saturated, because it's about figuring out what those gifts are, and also how you have previous experience that lends to these gifts, and like articulating that in a way that makes sense, that
Mhm.
really establishes you as a leader. So for example, if we look at my business, I was able to grow my business to six figures with like less than 2,000 followers on Instagram and less than 1,000 people on my email list. But,
Awesome.
at this time, like I was doing business coaching at this time, and it was like, well, I like, my top gifts are like speaking, teaching, creating, and connecting, which was like gifts that I was doing a ton. And it was easy for me to make courses, easy for me to coach clients, easy for me to do webinars. Those were like things I was really gifted at. And I was building businesses and working with like people that I feel like were like literally my friends, and harnessing a skill set that I really had. Like I had already built my own business. I knew business inside out from business school, 3 previous businesses, what I had learned at that pre-accelerator program, sales skills I had learned at Tesla, like things that I had really picked up in my journey, where I kind of arrived at a point in my destiny where I felt like I was designed to do this. It was like easy for me. And that's, I feel like, such a differentiating factor between, I feel like, businesses that work out and businesses that don't. It's like it's obvious when people are using their gifts and harnessing that skill set and using the talents they've picked up previously in life, versus like trying to do something they're not good at, which was me with my 3 startups, or like trying to do stuff that looks good on paper, or trying to like do stuff out of the sake of ego. That kind of stuff always crumbles, but like the authentic stuff always seems to work out.
I love that. See, that was so inspiring.
Good.
Just
I
like
have
right
my book is
there.
coming out, so
Yeah.
I'm like, oh God, thank goodness somebody's gonna like this message. Because when you like spend months and months writing something and like nobody reads it but you, you're like, okay, good, this will go somewhere, hopefully.
No, I'm sure it'll go somewhere. Like, even then, it's just like, you know, I always tell people, which you said it so much better, but I'd always tell people, like, people buy from you because it's you. Like, if you
Yeah.
stay authentic to who you are, who your brand is, well, I guess what your brand is, so on, that's what they're buying into, right? It's, of course, the products and the services,
Hmm.
but a lot of it is you as a person. And so I just
Yeah.
like, love the way that you were able to kind of really, I guess, focus on that and turn it into something great and then help other people focus on that as well.
Hmm.
So, okay, so tell me about your book deal, right?
Hmm.
Because I'm sure there's some people out there who are like, what the heck? This is like, okay, like your story's great. This is awesome. But how did you get a book deal? What
Yeah.
what was that like?
That was one hell of a process, because I mean, I had started pitching that book when my business just turned 4. So my business had just turned 3.
Mhm.
And I had literally been working on it, to give people a reference. Like I had been working on that thing like every single day for the last 3 years. Like I had working on it. I went full time very soon in my business. Um, but like I had literally been pouring my heart and soul into it for 3 years consistently, like, and like really playing big, putting myself out there. Um, I had initially wanted to it I kind of had like a kind of a rock bottom that sort of put me in a position where I was like, "Ugh, okay, crap." Like things were sort of not working out. I had made a bad business decision. I lost like a ton of money. I had to like do some big lifestyle pivots, and I was kind of at a point in my business where I was like, ugh, I don't know if I want to like keep doing things the way that they are. Like I feel like I need some sort of new energy or a change. Um, and I was actually working with my Facebook ads manager at the time, and we were trying to do this evergreen funnel, and this evergreen funnel was not converting, and we were spending all this time and money, and it wasn't working. And then she was like, "Why don't you try running ads to your quiz?" And I had just made my quiz with Interact, my quiz, "What's Your Genius?" And it had already done well when I was promoting it organically, like on social media or in my podcast. And then we put money behind it on Facebook ads, and it took off like crazy. We were getting leads for extremely cheap, like 25 cents a piece. And I had grown my email list really quickly to like 6,000 people. And it was one of those times when I realized, wait, this is like actually something that I've been doing that I didn't realize was as important as I thought. Like I was like, oh, this is like to me, this was like a step that I would teach with a business to a business coaching client, or like a module in one of my courses that focuses on how to find your genius and monetize it. And it was really taking off. And I had initially thought that I had wanted to take this and pitch this as a TED talk. And I did pitch it as a TED talk and I got rejected, but I had like a semi good pitch. And I was like, okay, well, what else could I do with this? I'm like, okay, let me
Yeah.
try a book. Like, let me see if I can put this to a book proposal. And a book, I always had wanted to do a book even since the early days of my business. So I figured I might as well try. I feel like,
Mhm.
why not? I feel like I have a good concept, finding your genius. It was unique. It was different. Um, and I actually had previously written back in the day, I had already done one book before in my health blogging days. I tried to publish it and it failed. So I already knew what it was like to pitch a book and try to get agents. So I was like, oh, let me just try again. I've been there once, so let me try again. It was hard. I had 200 rejection letters from literary agents, and I
Wow.
like pitched and I kept pitching and pitching and pitching. A lot of people told me my following was too small and that they wanted like at least 50,000 followers. A lot of people were like, how are you going to market this? Because you have such a tiny audience. But I found an agent that believed in me and really loved my vision. And, I always feel like, once again, when you're doing your genius, you have these skills that you've picked up along the way. And my proposal was really strong. And like, I can't, coming from business school, I knew how to write business plans and proposals in and out. And I had been able to effectively explain, like, these are the competing books in the market and my book fits in there well. And these books have done, X million in sales, or like have been able to like hit New York Times bestsellers. And like, I feel like my book is in this category. And I feel like we could make this work because it's unique and different enough. And yeah, I ended up getting an agent. It took me time to pitch, but I got an agent. And then my agent like was turned around and got me a book deal, like literally in record time. We had like a month of COVID when editors at publishing houses weren't working. So we had like a month go by and nobody was in office. So she was like, I can't send your book out now. But she had two major publishing houses in mind. And the first week that they were back in office, she said she sent them out. And our top pick said, we want to get on a phone call with you this week. And we had a phone call that week. And then literally in the next week, I got a call from my agent saying that we got a book deal. So it was like super
Wow.
fast on
Yeah.
that end, but it took me forever to get an agent. But yeah, my first published book, P.S. You're a Genius, an unconventional guide to finding your innate gifts, even when you feel like you have none. It comes out this fall 2021 from Ben
That's
Villa
so
Books.
exciting. Wow, that's so exciting.
Yeah,
Wow, that's awesome. And I like how you kind of were honest about, I sent it to a ton of people. I got 200 rejections because that's like normal, right? Like
yeah,
you are probably going to get rejected more than you are going to get, I guess. What is it? Accepted?
yeah.
So I guess what obviously it didn't feel good. I don't want to say like what did that feel like,
Mhm,
but how did you process through all of those rejections, and even if it's not a book deal, even if it's just like,
mhm.
trying to get people to subscribe to your email list, right? And or even, they think they're interested in being a client and then last minute they're like just kidding. How do you process through rejections like that?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I feel like my journey has had so much rejection and like so much failure. And I always like to explain how much failure I've had because on Instagram, it looks like I'm just like, oh, Kelly's got that great speaking gig at Uber next month. Like, of course she can because she's Kelly. Um, I feel like I really learned that muscle of trust and really leaning into that discomfort and sort of knowing. I always like to follow on the numbers and the stats, and I feel like that always helps me take the emotion out of it, because this is also what I tell always my students and clients when they're trying to get clients or trying to pitch for stuff or trying to get people to sign up to their webinar to buy their course, or get them people on their newsletter. You know, knowing your numbers always helps, because I had read an article online saying, okay, you're going to need to pitch at least 100 agents to get a book deal. And if you don't get it at 100, then you might need to pitch at least 150 agents. So I was like, okay, I already had in my head, I'm going to need to pitch a lot. So I was just like, every single time I sent her an email, I was like, I'm one step closer to 100 people I've pitched. And the numbers ended up being right, because at the end I had two offers from agents. So that
Mhm.
works out to 1 in 100. Or even when I'm working with clients, usually on average, if you have 4 consult calls, one person will buy. So if you know that you have 4 consult calls, it's okay if 3 people say no, because in the average, one
Mm,
is going to buy. So I feel
yeah.
like knowing the numbers and the conversion rates takes out that sting of rejection, because you're just like, oh, this is one of the 4 that's going to pass. No problem. I'm just like one step closer to my manifestation or my goal or the thing that I really want.
Ooh, I love that perspective. I
Yeah.
have not thought of that before.
Yeah, I had also one of the teachers who was when I was in that pre-accelerator program, it was in San Mateo, so not too far from you.
Yeah.
But one of the guys had said he was like, he had built something and then had become an angel investor, and he had said, and this was one of my very early exposures to like really like entrepreneurial thinking from people who were actually really successful. And he said, the faster you go through 1,000 ideas, the faster you get to $1 billion. And
Uh,
I was like, wow, I was like mind blown, because he was essentially just trying to teach us like it's okay to fail, and it's okay to fail quickly and go through tons of ideas and go through a ton of things, because then you're going to hit your goal.
yeah.
And it was just really helpful to kind of know that really early on, like right out of the gate, knowing that you're going to have to do a fair amount of like legwork, and that's fine, because you're going to hit, eventually an agent that wants your book, or you're going to get a client that actually wants to work with you, or you're going to get somebody that's like excited to sign up for your email newsletter after promoting it a ton on Instagram. So knowing that there's like a phase that you have to go through before you actually hit the goal, I think is really key.
I love that a lot. I think that's great advice, actually, because I mean, part of why we're doing this podcast, right, is for people to see like, hey, there is still a journey before you do hit that success. It's
Mm-hmm.
just that most of the time you're only going to see success stories,
Mm-hmm.
but I think it's so important to hear that. Ah, I love that a lot. Okay, I know I say that a lot, but that's awesome. And I think that is really key to figure out early on, especially if you just launched or you're
Mm-hmm.
rebranding, or even if you're in one of those pivot stages where your business wasn't working, right? But you
Mm-hmm.
keep trying so hard to make it work. Maybe it's just leading you to your next thing.
Yeah.
Um, Another question that I had for you that I heard you say was, a lot of the agents said that your following was too small.
Mm-hmm.
And I know we talked a little bit about this earlier, but kind of can you walk me through how you do still manage to be so successful with a smaller audience?
Yeah. First and foremost, I look at the stats and stuff, but when it comes to certain notions or mindsets, I actively choose not to believe a lot of things. So when people were like, "Oh, you can't get a book deal with a small audience," I'm like, I'm not taking on that belief. Or like when people use, I know when I was trying to like find a really nice apartment in Vancouver to rent. It was always the story and the notion of like, oh, it's hard to get a place in Vancouver. Or like, when I was living in San Francisco, it was like, oh, well, if it's going to be really expensive and the place is going to be shit. I'm like, I'm not listening to that. Like, that's not my truth. Like, that's not my story. Or like, right, this is another one. Like, I don't believe in writer's block. Like, I had zero writer's block writing my book because I don't actively buy into those stories, even though everybody's going to be like, oh, it's going to be hard and you're going to have a hard time writing. I'm like, I have a deadline and it's 4 months and I got to get this done. There's no time for writer's block. So I feel like
Mhm.
I don't even let myself believe those stories, because I just choose a new narrative. Things like I'm going to get a book deal. I'm like, I just need to find people that have done it, people that have been able to get book deals with small audiences, and find what I like to call these realistic role models, like people where you see yourself in them, and they've been be able to go on and do what you want to do. And I had to like really actively seek out people who got book deals with tiny audiences and like learn their story or learn their journey, or like listen to what they had put in their proposals, or like how they were marketing themselves. And a lot of it was from what I had learned from like looking at these examples, like these people really had focused on how effectively they could market and how well they could market their book to make up for their fact that they had a low following. So it's like, okay, let me put that in my proposal. So I think not believing the narrative and then finding people who've gone on to do what you want to do and like learning how they did it can be super effective for you to get what you want in your like present circumstance.
That's awesome. I like that a lot. I think that's you have such great advice. I'm just like pulling so much right now. I'm learning a lot. No, I think that's awesome finding people that, you want to aspire to be, but are kind of within the same, I guess, would you say category or like realm of what you
Mm-hmm.
do and, what your spot is right now. I think that's great. I guess in terms of your core business,
Mm-hmm.
right? How do you work through having a smaller audience? What's the pros and cons of it?
Yeah, I feel like, I mean, I will say a major con is I am consistently pitching to the same people all the time. So I definitely have to, in the back of my mind, I'm always thinking about like, how can I grow? How can I get in front of new eyeballs? But I feel like there's so many pros. Like I always feel like, I just feel like I've been able to build up a relationship with my audience. I've done my podcast for like 4 years, and
Wow.
delivered a lot of like consistent content, and my weekly emails go out, and I've been able to be like very consistent, and I feel like I've been able to support and serve people a lot for free with like my free quiz is like very detailed, or like my email list letters are always really helpful. My podcast is really helpful. And I feel like I've been able to monetize effectively by having good quality content and really being of service before I go to like sell to people.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I also feel like I'm like a really spiritual and woo woo. And I just feel like what's meant for you won't pass by you. And I feel like the people who I'm meant to work with, I will connect with and they're going to hire me. And the people that are not going to buy my course, I'm like, whatever, it doesn't matter. Like, I
Yeah.
kind of don't, I'm like, it wasn't meant to be, or like two ships
Mhm.
passing in the night, like no big deal. Like they can go work with somebody else. Or if they want to come join me in 3 years from now and take a course, sure, like all good, like do your thing. So I feel like having an abundance mindset is really important, and kind of knowing that like what's meant for you will come and will stick. And remembering to kind of, I feel like giving good content is really important to building up that audience and building up sort of a brand where people really can trust you and look at you through the lens of like, this person can really support me or serve me, or like they're giving very practical good advice that's helping me with my stage of where I'm at. Like they
Mhm.
feel me, they understand me, they see me, they're somebody I could turn to for like help and trust. And if they've loved your free content, they will turn into, paid
Yeah.
customers, because they're like, well, if this stuff was free, this is really good. Well, like, what's the paid stuff like?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I like that. So I guess, you talked about knowing your numbers
Mhm.
and does that tie into your business, your core business now when you're like, okay, like here's maybe the goal I want to reach in terms of my income, here's like what I want to get out of this. Yeah, does that go into that or how do you figure out like, okay, this is worth it to continue what I'm doing?
Yeah, I always, if I have revenue goals, I reverse engineer those to see like, okay, if I want to have, say for easy math, like 10 students in my course, you know, how many people need to be on a webinar? Like, because I know my webinars are going to convert at a certain rate. If I have like 100 people sign up, 3 to 5% are actually going to turn into like purchases. So if I need like 10 purchases, I need like almost 200 people to sign up, and if I need 200 signups, like how am I going to get enough people to sign up? Like, what have I done in the past to get signups? Like, what was working well? Like, and essentially just continuing to do enough marketing to get like 200 people to sign up, because I know my numbers will trickle out into like the desired, roughly 10 students. So kind of like working backwards is always really helpful. Or like knowing like if I need to sign, if I really want to get 2 private clients, it's like, okay, well, if I want 2 private clients, I need to do 8 consult calls. So like, how can I get 8 people on the phone? So I've always like, whenever I'm trying to hit income goals or like student goals of like
Yeah.
enrollments, I always just try to reverse engineer those numbers. Um, in terms of like knowing if it's working, I mean, I'm at a point where I know my numbers and I know what converts, and I know what my numbers look like. I think when you're starting, only you really know if you are really on the mark. And I mean, I'm not saying this just because I work as a business coach, but having somebody else kind of look at your stuff is super helpful and key, because
Mhm.
when you don't know your blind spots, it's really hard. And I've been very lucky, over the years to have very good mentors who I've like sought out and like paid for and like paid a lot of money to work with, but them telling me things gave me feedback that was like so key and so important for me to know. So like if things aren't converting, it's like don't continue to like just like hammer it out and try and try and try, because it's like sometimes it's just a couple quick tweaks to fix it, and you can move along your merry way. But it's having somebody who knows what those couple quick tweaks are to make gives you that input to move forward, which is really important when you're stuck at that moment of friction.
I like that. And how do you come up with I guess eventually it's a lot of trial and error, but how do you come up with, okay, I want 10 students in this course, for example?
Yeah. I mean, those just come down to numbers. So it's like if I'm like, okay, if I want a 6-figure year, what do I need to sell? How many courses of this do I need to sell? How many courses of that? How many private intensive clients? How many people need to sign up for a membership? I'll kind of do the numbers at the start of the year of like, okay, what feels like realistic that I could aim for? Like how many students in what?
Yeah.
What does that look like? So I'll kind of trickle back and kind of look at it like that. But that being said, I'm also like, I mean, I'm at a bit of a different stage in my business now where like I'm looking to do kind of like a whole new chapter of like my book coming out this year and sort of pivoting into other things. Like now I kind of get opportunities for like speaking engagements and sort of this like new tier. So it's like I'm also open to the window of possibilities of whether cool stuff is out there or like other income streams that are just different. Like book royalties is like a whole other beast. I mean, it's like
Mhm.
it's like a whole nother thing, but it's like also taking into account the unexpected and like the miracles and the cool things you could never like expect or prepare or imagine, and allowing those to kind of come into your life too. Because I feel like I'm starting to turn the corner where I'm starting to get like cool opportunities that are paid and something
Mhm.
I was never setting out to originally do, but I'm like, I will totally take that because that's awesome.
Yeah, I think this came up because I mean, we get a lot of questions about growth and,
Mhm.
mostly in particular to their quiz, but all I really know to answer is just like it kind of depends on how you want to grow,
Yeah.
right? And like what does growth mean to
Yeah.
you? What does that look like? And so in your case, I love that, you're so focused that it's like, hey, like growth for me might look different than somebody who's like, I need 10,000 people on my email list. You know,
Totally.
like that looks a little bit different, but it's still growth.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually yesterday I was doing I was doing a psychic reading with this intuitive.
Oh
I
my
was just
god.
asking her for her perspective on like this new pivot I'm looking to make. But she was actually asking me, she's like, one of the questions I keep getting, to give you is like, Kelly, what does success look like for you now? She's like, versus what it looked like for
Oh.
you 2 or 3 years ago. Cause I feel like 2 or 3 years ago, success would have been like, oh, I need to hit six figures. I need to make a certain amount, get a certain amount of students. And I feel like when I literally last night I rewrote my definition of success and what that meant. And it was just
Wow.
like it was, there's certain things, but it's like I was just really surprised because it was just different. Like it was stuff
Yeah.
like, I want to be able to like own my own home and like be financially comfortable enough where I can go to like Hawaii, 2, 3 times a year and get all my groceries at like Whole Foods and like live my life and have lots of freedom and space and time. I want to feel like I'm making an impact and I'm helping people and like that I'm being like well compensated, but I'm like also helping. And there really wasn't like any like hard numbers attached to it or like number of students. And I feel like I've kind of evolved out of that phase. Like it's important to still do the numbers and I do the numbers still, but like kind of knowing that what does that really look like? Like what do you really want? Like what is like your soul really calling you towards, or like what is that really deeper inkling or desire that you have, and like kind of honoring that and looking at that and letting that be your guiding metric of success versus just numbers and am I hitting sales goals, because that kind of gets, once you've been doing it for a while, it kind of gets boring and then you're like, okay, I'm on to my next thing,
Yeah.
I'm ready for like my like 2.0 level or like something more fulfilling or like more deep, because in the beginning it is fun to like get your sales and get that going, but once you do kind of hit it, you're like, okay, I kind of want something different, something more, I
Yeah.
guess, heartfelt.
Yeah, and like what's the next step? What's my next
Mhm.
challenge, right? Like what
Yeah.
else can I do? No, yeah, I think that's great. Do you, I guess, is this something that you go through often where, you know, you have like a specific, maybe not specific, but you have a method or a timeline of like, okay, next year I'm going to revisit and do another reflection and see, what this will look like, or, yeah, just how often, or do you even do that, or does it just kind of come to you?
Yeah, I feel like I kind of try to tap in whenever I get really stuck and whenever I hit the wall, which sometimes that's like twice a year, sometimes that's once a year, sometimes it's like lately it's been almost like every other month. Like just especially like when you're up leveling, I feel like the universe gives you many opportunities to grow and challenge yourself and be thrown into the new level. And sometimes that's not always easy. So I feel like whenever I hit walls, I like try to go back to things that have really kind of brought me home. One book I always love is Danielle Laporte's The Desire Map, because that really has always helped me get clear on what exactly do I want and what am I really looking for, because she is all about figuring out your core desired feelings. And it's like figuring out words that you're trying to embody. So like for me, it's like freedom. And it's not actually like trying to hit seven figures. It's like I just want, like, I'm trying to get freedom. Like that's like what I want, like
Yeah.
to feel free or like to have an easy life. Like that's what I really want. So sometimes just knowing those things and like regrouping and coming back home is really helpful. But yeah, I also like to get clear. One of the things that's really helped me in my journey is human design, which is like a cousin to astrology. And
Oh,
it's a very like, it's kind of a niche interest, but there's different energy types. And I am a generator, and generators they're like kind of the worker bees of society, and they like are supposed to do work that lights them up. And like 70% of people are generators, but they also like hit kind of plateaus in their journey of mastery and getting better over time. So sometimes I know when I'm in that plateau and it just feels like I'm in a plateau.
yeah.
And when I kind of get that feeling of I'm like hitting the wall, that's when I kind of come back and, call my therapist, read my books that bring me like support, like do journal prompts, like, you know, do that kind of work and kind of come back to myself in order to kind of make that next level up.
Is there any time when you do like hit these walls that you're just like, I'm gonna quit? I don't know if I want to do this anymore.
Oh yeah. I have had that feeling a lot. Yeah, I remember specifically, I think it was like year 2 or year 3. I would like cry a lot, and I would like cry to my previous partner, and I would just like bawl my eyes out because it was hard or it was really challenging. And I always like, this is like the final chapter of my book too. It's like remembering that like, you have your genius for a reason, and like it's no matter how hard it gets or how many rejections you're getting or how difficult the path is, like there's really somebody out there that needs what you have to offer and needs your gifts and needs that. And I feel like it's really helpful to kind of take the emphasis off you and putting it on somebody else, and remembering like, to keep going because somebody needs it and somebody needs that support. So I definitely hit walls when I want to quit. I mean, I'm in a phase where I'm like literally looking to pivot and switch things up and kind of go for my next evolution. Um, but I definitely know what it's like to hit that wall. And I mean, I also have quit. Like I've quit 3 businesses. So I think it's a fine line of knowing when it's actually time to quit and when you're like, I actually love this so much, I don't want to quit. I'm going to keep trying. But I feel like it's only from your intuitive senses if you're like really ready to quit, or if you're like, you know what, maybe tomorrow I could, maybe try one more time. Because that's always been the case
Yeah.
for me in this 4th business. It's always been like, yep, I'm like crying all night and I'm like really upset and I'm gonna just like watch a ton of Netflix. But you know what, tomorrow I'm gonna feel a little bit better. And I think maybe I'm gonna give it like one more try for one more day and see how it goes.
Yeah. I think though that's why it's so important to really reflect on what you want, and
Yeah.
what you want to get out of this, what the outcome is going to be, or what you want it to be. And like you said, knowing yourself,
Mm-hmm.
because then your gut feeling will tell you, right?
Yeah.
Like, okay, tomorrow is a new day
Mm-hmm.
versus, yeah, like tomorrow is going to be a new day for something else, not this one.
Yeah.
So I think that's why it's so important. And I just kind of love that you touched on all of that and you still work through it with a lot of stuff in your business. I think that's awesome.
Thanks. Well, yeah, it's good on the other side. I mean, in the moment, it's like totally terrible.
Oh, yeah, yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
sure. But I think too, I don't know, it's just like when you have your own business, you also have to expect that there's going to be days like that,
Oh
right?
yeah.
And
Yeah.
you just have to remember, like, okay, I knew this would come at some point, but what's my next step? What do I want to do from here?
Totally. And I feel like if it's not happening, it's a sign that you're not like really pushing after your goals and getting what you really want. Like I feel like
Mhm.
failure, I don't know who said it, but it's like, like failure and success are not like opposite sides of the coin. They're like the same freaking coin. It's like, and
Yeah.
if you really want something, you will fail first. And it's just getting, I think, really comfortable with failure and like just sort of I feel like I got to know those rock bottoms so clearly that now I'm like, okay, rock bottom, sure, like bring it. Like I've done rock bottoms a million times, I feel like, with this business. And I'm like,
Mhm.
any rock bottom that comes, I can handle it, because I've like had really, 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 really bad rock bottoms, or like was very close to like, I'm like, oh my God, do I have to file for bankruptcy? Or like, like I lost like an apartment at one time, like, having to move back home to my parents' house after my startups. Like I feel like I've been handed so many things where I'm like, anything, whenever you do have a rock bottom, like the other side usually has like so much like growth and like what you really want. So it's also like, now I feel like when I hit those rock bottoms, I'm like, okay, like I have a certain level of trust that I can make it to the other side, and it's actually going to be okay because I've been here so many times before.
Yeah, a lot of what I'm hearing you say, well, not really saying, but like from what you are saying, what I hear is your perspective has a lot to do with making that next step or figuring out what that
Mm-hmm.
next step is. And just kind of staying positive about it, and looking at the
Yeah.
positive side versus just like, oh my gosh, this sucks and it's not going anywhere, and not psyching yourself out pretty much.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I feel like mindset is such a key part because it's like, you kind of only have two options, like make the best of it or like give into it, and I feel like it kind of comes down, you know, to just sort of picking the right mindset and having the right perspective on it and being okay with it. And I think, entrepreneurship is not for everybody. And it's like, I feel like it's very like sexy and glamorized, but it's like, sometimes I do get students and clients that are like, sometimes I have to be like, I don't know if you're cut out for this, or like, I don't know if this is, or like your genius might be actually better in a corporate job. And that's totally fine. And it's because it does take a certain amount of like pressure, and it takes like a certain, like, there is that. And I feel like that is a huge part of the process. So it's like kind of like also knowing what you're signing up for. And it's like,
Yeah.
if you're asking for big things, like you will be given opportunities to grow. So it's like, do you want those or like not? Or like, would you
Yeah.
prefer doing something else?
Yeah, and, is it even the right time?
Yeah.
Is it in a few years? Is it something you wanna do right now? That's good advice. I think that I'm sure a lot of people are either going through that or they have gone through that and they're like, "Oh, yeah, I remember that."
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
remember that part. I have heard a lot of stories, though, where people did take breaks and they're like,
Yeah.
"I went back to a full-time job and kinda worked on this on the side," and if it is something that, you know, is meant to be, then
Yeah.
it will at some point happen.
Yeah. I totally agree. I feel like it's individual to like everybody in their journey. And it's sort of like what feels good for you and what feels right for you. And there's no like right answer or wrong answer.
Yeah,
And just sort of trusting that it's all gonna kind of make sense one day and work out for you.
I love that. I love that. Well, that's all the questions that I had. Do you have any last minute, I guess, things that you went through that are really critical part of your story?
I feel like we touched on some of the big ones. I mean, I feel like the most important thing that I've really learned over the years is to really trust my intuition and listen, especially when other people want certain things for you or you think you want something, but really listening to your intuition and your heart and your gut, because that keeps you really on the right path for like your specific life and like your destiny. And I feel like that's just been a key thing that I've really had to learn. I mean, I really feel like I've dipped my toes into like the spiritual world or like the woo woo world. But I also, I came from such like a structured like business school background. This was all like brand new, but these were skills that nobody taught me that I really had to like learn on my own. Like,
Yeah,
what does it look like to trust yourself or like, follow what feels good for you? And like that is more important in my opinion than what makes sense on like a chart or like what looks good in a graph chart or like what makes sense in a spreadsheet, but like what feels good for you and trusting that because it can be hard to listen to that and follow through on it.
that's so true. I remember like in school, it was all about like, here's how you do this, here's how you do that, and here's the strategy for this, here's why this number works, and all of that. And I love that you say woo woo world.
I'm like super, I feel like I'm like really, I don't know. Some people are like, oh, astrology is kind of weird. I'm like really like
I'm
into the
so into
depths.
it. I'm not even gonna lie. I think I mean, it yeah, I don't know, like, who knows,
Yeah.
what's real and what's not, but I think energies are definitely plays a part in
Yeah,
your everyday life, right?
totally.
Um, no, yeah, I'm totally into it, in case anyone wanted to know that. Um, so I have a couple of last minute questions and really just to kind of get to know you a little bit better as a person. So,
Yeah.
what are 3 things that most people wouldn't know about you?
Oh, that's such a fun question. I would say I love savory foods. Like I love savory foods a lot, and I'm more savory than sweet. Like I don't have much of a sweet tooth, but like I really crave salt. Like chips or like pickles or like olives. I love that. I have a scar on my knee, and it sounds really fun, but I only have one major scar, and it was from riding a motorcycle. But it wasn't
Oh,
even that badass because it was a stationary motorcycle, and it was at this media event when I was like a summer intern at a magazine, and you had to like sit on the Harley Davidson and take a picture, but it was running, and my knee hit this pipe, and I got a really bad second-degree burn. So I have this like scar on my knee from that. So it sounds badass that I like got this scar from a motorcycle, but like I like just like sat on it, and it was like a really pathetic story. Um,
Still kind of badass, you know, just stop at the motorcycle part.
yeah, totally. Other cool fun fact about me. Uh, I feel like I feel like I get so many downloads, as I would call them, like when I'm really like by the ocean. Like for me, that's like my place. And it's like if I like want new ideas or like need to really think about my life and figure something out, I just go to the ocean and I feel like the answers will come to me.
That's really interesting, like, you have a spot pretty
Yeah.
much, you know?
Yeah, and it can take different forms. I mean, I prefer ideally like Hawaii and like no phone. But even if I'm like, I mean, I live in Vancouver, Canada, so the ocean's right there. But it's like if I go down to the ocean or the seawall or like just knowing that, I guess I just know that that works for me. So it's like if you know
Mhm.
that there's something that works for you that can give you consistent like space and openness, like use it.
Yeah. Yeah, and it can even be in your own bedroom, just kind of
Yeah.
creating that environment, right? Where this is how ideas come to you or this is how you really work through problems and
Hmm.
stuff like that. No, yeah, I think that's so true. You can also I got really into ocean sounds in the last
Ooh.
year. Yeah, like I mean, I love being at the ocean, but for me
Yeah.
it's not that easily accessible, and in the Bay
Yeah.
Area, the ocean here is very
Yeah.
cold. For
Totally.
me at least.
Yeah.
I don't know if other
Yeah.
people feel the same way, but like the beach is pretty cold up here. But I got really into ocean sounds,
Nice.
and it's a very specific ocean sound. I can't really describe what it is, but that's what I use to create, you know, an environment for myself where I'm just like, I need to relax and calm down. Can't do river sounds.
They're
It's
not the same. I
Yeah,
totally know what you mean.
they're not the same. I had a question that I wanted to ask you based off of your first fun fact. What was it again?
Oh, the salty foods.
Yeah, oh my gosh, it wasn't a question, but I recently did, I did a one of those genetic tests.
Oh, like 23andMe and
Yeah,
stuff?
I did 23andMe, and it said that's, like, stuff that's in your genes,
Oh,
and
interesting.
'cause I love salt too, which
Mm,
sounds so bad when I say it.
I
I have,
know.
like, really high sodium one day, probably
I
like
I have, like, probably extremely high sodium too. My mom's like, "You gotta stop eating so much salt." And I'm like,
Well, just drink water. But
Yeah.
yeah, that was something that was in there, and I was like, "Oh, that's really interesting that
Yeah.
that's a gene trait that you prefer more, like, salty foods, and
Oh,
it can predict,
fascinating.
like not really predict, but it says, like,
Yeah.
you probably have a high sodium or, like, will at some
Yeah.
point in your life." Thought that was funny.
Yeah, that's really neat.
Right? Okay, so the last thing that I have for you is if you could, you know, go see yourself back at the start of it all, what's a single piece of advice that you would say?
Oh my gosh. I'd probably just say keep going. Like, I doubted myself a ton and I was like, "Oh, can I do this? Like, will I ever get there?" I would probably be like, "You're going to be totally fine and you're
Mhm.
going to go exactly where you want to go and it's going to be even better than you could ever like expect or prepare or imagine and you're going to get what you want, but it's going to be in a really different way than you thought." Like I really thought I was going to be literally the next Gwyneth Paltrow with my health blog and I thought I was going to have like a cookbook, like a plant-based like vegan gluten-free cookbook and
Yeah.
I, like, literally thought that that was gonna be my destiny and my thing, and nope, we're writing a book on, like, how to find your genius, and now I work as a business coach. So it's, like, being open, and I'd say you're gonna get what you want, but it's gonna come in a different package.
I love that. I like that a lot. That's
Yeah.
awesome. All right, Kelly. Well, thank you so much for being on here with me today.
Thank you for having me, Jessamine. This was such a pleasure. You asked great questions. You're such a good interviewer.
Oh, thank you. Not to toot my own horn out there, but I'm just kidding. No, thank you so much for being here. This was really, honestly, just so inspiring, and I love talking with you. Can't wait for everyone else to hear it.
Thanks. Me too, me too.
Of course. All right, guys. Oh, last thing before I forget, I always forget this question. Where can people find you online?
At kellytrach.com. So it's TRACH is my last name. And there you can take my very popular quiz I made with Intrac called What's Your Genius? You'll see it. You'll see it on the website. It'll come up as a pop-up.
Awesome. All right, guys. Well, thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.